There is a bias against entrepreneurs. I own my own career coaching business. I've had it for the past 4.5 years. I've worked with about 275 clients. And I had an interview last week. It was via Zoom with a staffing agency. And they were looking for a temporary recruiter for a pharmaceutical client that's like 15 minutes away from my apartment. And I have pharmaceutical HR experience. I worked at Sanofi for 2 years. I've recruited at Dow Jones and Bank of America. I have full cycle recruiting experience, which is something they were looking for. That means that I've done everything from like sourcing the candidates, phone screening the candidates, scheduling the candidates for interviews, as well as doing like reference checks, background checks, and then onboarding the new hires, right? So that's like full cycle recruiting, doing all of the administrative aspects of recruiting, as well as actually like obviously the candidate facing aspects of recruiting, like phone screening and interviewing. So I have that. And the other quality they were looking for was somebody that had high volume experience. I had over 50 requisitions and 9 different business areas at Dow Jones. So I had exactly the experience they were looking for. And the staffing agency told me that. Like, she was like, it's 90 days. And then from there, like, we'll see what happens. But she was like, you're perfect. You're what we're looking for. I'm going to send you over to the pharmaceutical client. So then the agency called me back, the staffing agency, and said that the client liked me as well and that she just wanted to know what my availability was to do a video interview with her. So I gave her my availability. And then I waited like 2 days to hear back, which I thought was kind of long because I had said I was basically available like the rest of the week, like from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I was like, what's taking so long if both the staffing agency liked me when I interviewed with them, and then the client said she liked me based off of my resume and the agency's feedback? And it's like, so then what's the problem? And then what happened was the staffing agency recruiter called me and said that her supervisor basically pulled her aside and said that she believed there was a conflict potentially of interest, because I own, so my business is called Career Glow Up because I own Career Glow Up, and it's career coaching and like resume writing, but I do also offer recruitment consulting. So it's not a recruiting agency, right? But I do offer like one-off like hiring services to like LLCs and like fellow coaches and consultants, right? So it's not a recruiting agency. And I explained that to the recruiter that I had already interviewed with. And she was like, yeah, she was like, we need to know if it's like a conflict of interest. I'm like, it's not. And then she was like, I'm not concerned, or I wouldn't have interviewed you. But she's like, my supervisor at my agency is. And she was like, she's also concerned about Reflik. Now, Reflik, Reflik, is a freelance recruiting marketing platform. So it's not an agency, right? It's not like Manpower. It's not like Robert Half, right? It's not. You basically just go on this website and anybody can pick any requisition, right? And then you can submit candidates. So I explained that to her, right? It's like, I'm not recruiting for like a competitor of your staffing agency. Like, if you go to Reflect right now, there's basically like no vetting process. Like, anybody can submit candidates, right? So I told her, I was like, it was basically just something that I was doing while I was job searching. As soon as I receive an offer, I'll stop with Reflect. And I told her, I was like, I haven't even submitted candidates. She like put me on hold for a few minutes, and she came back and she was like, yeah, so like again with Career Glow Up, like, is there gonna be like a conflict, Patricia? I understand what you're saying, that like it's not a recruiting agency, so like you're not on any like vendor approved list or anything like that. But she was like, is there gonna be a conflict in terms of like work hours and like your commitment? And it's like, I said no, right? Like, right now I don't even sell services through my business. So like, I don't have my website for Career Glow Up anymore. I don't have the Calendly page for people to book me for calls anymore, right? And I took down my LinkedIn services page. So like, you literally cannot even book me for a career coaching session. I used to sell an 8-week coaching program that was one-on-one, and then I had like 1 hour one-off coaching sessions, and then I sold resumes, cover letters, and LinkedIn profiles. So I was like, if you go back to my LinkedIn, you'll see that like my services page is down. If you type in the careerglowup.com, which was my domain, it's expired, right? So you just get an error message. So I was like, there's no conflict of interest. And I was like, that's the reason, like one of the reasons that I'm job searching right now is that um, I had it for 4.5 years. Like I did the thing and like worked with almost 300 people. And I'm just like ready to do something else and something different and something new. But I told her, I was like, with that said, I'm not going to dissolve my LLC because in order for me to be hired as a vendor. So, like when I was a career advisor for Yale University back in fall of 2021, they hired me as a vendor through my business, Career Glow Up. So they paid me on a W-9, right? It was not like a W-2 1040 opportunity. And I've done freelancing like that before. And like you have to have an LLC set up a lot of the times in order to be paid, right? So like I've also freelanced a lot on Upwork and I've made a couple of thousands of dollars recruiting on there as well as writing resumes, but they pay me on a 1099, right? Like Schedule K form. That's through my LLC, right? So it's like, it varies. Some places will let you freelance and they'll pay you as an individual just on a 1099. But like Yale would not have done that, right? They were like, we have to actually onboard you as a vendor and put you in our vendor services provider system. So it's like, I'm not going to get rid of my LLC. So it's like, it still exists. That's why it's on my LinkedIn and it's on my resume. But I'm not selling services through it. I don't have clients. And it's like, I never heard back from them. Like I never heard back from them. And then it's like her supervisor at the staffing agency viewed my profile. It's a very small staffing agency that's like maybe 15 minutes away from my apartment. And they're not a national chain. So it's not like, the person who viewed my LinkedIn profile from their agency, oh, maybe they work for like someone else. It's like, no, right? This is not a chain. It's one location. It's like less than 50 employees. So it was very clear to me because all the communication stopped. And like prior to that, me and the recruiter were like emailing each other and like we had connected to each other on LinkedIn and like she had sent me a few messages and was just like updating me like, hey, I'm just waiting to hear back from the client. And it's like, no, there's a bias against entrepreneurs at that point. Because if the only thing that went wrong was my business, it's like, how is that not a bias, right? Like that's the only reason now that I don't even get to interview with the pharmaceutical client who had told the recruiter at the agency that she really liked me and was just like, give me Patricia's availability. Like I want to jump on with her this week because I need somebody that can hit the ground running, that's not going to be overwhelmed or drown. And she was like, I don't want a recruiter that can't do the admin side. It's like all I've done my whole career as a recruiter anyway, is like full cycle. So I left corporate in 2019, right? For about 5 years. Like I worked at Dow Jones, I worked at Bank of America. I worked at an emergency medical services company, right? Like I've worked in a couple of different industries and it's like, that's all I've done. I've never had like a recruiting coordinator or a sourcer. Like I did everything myself. So it's like, it was exactly what they were looking for. And the staffing agency, like when they initially called me about the position, had said that like they're currently drowning, like the pharmaceutical client, because it's basically like one recruiter that's doing everything by herself and like cannot keep up with anything. And it's like, to continue that situation just because you have a bias against entrepreneurs. That's what it's about. You're making assumptions that aren't true and they're not valid. You're assuming that, oh, she's an entrepreneur and she owns an LLC. So if we bring Patricia on, she is not going to be committed and she's going to be focused on Career Glow Up. It's like, how the fuck do you know that? Like, that's not even true. If that was true, I wouldn't be job searching. Are there people that do that? There are people that do everything. So what if I'm not an entrepreneur? That means that I'm going to be the best recruiter for you ever. So I could just be sitting there and I could be going on social media, right? I could just be sitting there and I could be texting people. I could be sitting there and I could be on Discord and I could be on WhatsApp, right? It's like this bias of like, we don't want too many cooks in the kitchen kind of a thing. And it's like, that's not fair, right? Because I was highly qualified and I didn't even get a chance to interview with the client. And it's just something that I've noticed again and again and again, that there's this bias and this assumption that like, just because I'm an entrepreneur, like people do not want to hire me back for like any kind of like W-2 work, any kind of like corporate work. And they're assuming incorrectly that there's a conflict of interest when there isn't one.